Okay, this is just to announce we'll begin in 1 minute. Just to let everyone file in if they haven't already. For some of those of you who are in the back standing, I mean, there are some spots up here if you want to take a seat as well. You're welcome to have you up here. So to start out, I'd like to thank everyone for coming on this beautiful September evening to attend the first event hosted by the University of Toronto Men's Issues Awareness Society. Before we start, though, I have three important announcements to make. Just housekeeping before we start and before I introduce the keynote speaker. The first is, as with any public speaking event, we ask that you at least silence your phones or turn them to vibrate if you have the option to do so, just out of respect to those speaking here. Secondly, the policy of the university on freedom of speech, the policy of the university of disruption of events and of campus groups is now in effect. That's just to announce that. If there is any unlikely event that we're disrupted in any way, I just urge you to please follow the instructions and the directions, follow the directions of the security members of the security force here, and everything should be okay, but that's, again, an unlikely circumstance. As well, the third thing I wanted to announce just before I introduce myself is basically the itinerary tonight. So just to start out, I'll mention a little bit about my organization in case you haven't read up or in case you haven't heard anything about us. In addition to that, we will introduce the keynote speaker, Dr. Miles Groth, to speak on for the reason he was invited here. And after that, we'll have a Q&A session. It'll go for as long as there are questions. I'll be moderating that. And after that, everyone here is invited to the reception, the fundraising reception for the Canadian Association for Equality that will be held at O'Grady's, which is across the street. It's actually 171 College Street, and everyone is welcome. Okay, so to begin, my name is Dylan Fodiadis. I'm a student here, third-year student at UT, and I began volunteering at the UTMIA, the University of Toronto Men's Issues Awareness Society. I was drawn to the event just because I felt that it was a unique opportunity to get involved in something that isn't always spoken about as much as most of us believe it should be. So to begin, I just would also like to mention that, of course, nothing's possible without support from volunteers like myself and the other volunteers of this organization, but also our sponsors. So our main sponsor, of course, is the Canadian Association for Equality, represented here by Justin Trottier. And I would like to invite him, before we continue, just to have one or two words about his organization. Thank you, Dylan.
As Dylan quite rightly points out, this is a group effort, and there's a lot of volunteers involved in that group. So I'm going to call a couple of other members of our volunteer base, Michael and Hillary, to join me up here to help convey some messages, important messages on behalf of CAFE and of a very important campaign that we've recently launched.
Oh, smart arthritis. Okay. Hillary, do you want to start, Hillary, and just mention a few words? Talk about.
Sure. So, hi. My name is Hillary, and I've come down from Peterborough today to be here tonight and take part in this. Very excited to have this happening. I just wanted to say a few words of why I got involved with the association. I really didn't know at the time anyone in my life that was that had gone through anything that we help people with. People that have been sexually abused, people going through family court, people that have problems that they need that they need help with, and they just can't find the right sources because they feel they can't speak up. And unfortunately, that's something that in our society is pretty prominent, especially among men. And I didn't know anybody at the time, and this wasn't that long ago. This was maybe 6 months ago. And since I joined the organization, I've spoken up to men in my life, and I found out that many men in my life have gone through things. And I really, now, I wanted to make a difference before, but now I really want to make a difference, and I'm very excited to be here. And just to let you know my role in the association, I am the social media and volunteer coordinator. So stuff that you see on Facebook, on Twitter, that's all coming from Justin and then through me, and then I'm posting it. And I do coordinate the volunteers, which if anyone is interested in volunteering, definitely let us know because we're always looking. But thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. Okay, so I'd just like to take a brief moment to introduce CAFE. We're going to get to our speaker, Dr. Groth, shortly. But there's a lot of information and misinformation, misunderstanding flying around about CAFE. So I just wanted to take this opportunity briefly to clear up some notions that might be out there that be misunderstood and give you an idea of what we actually do and what we actually are supporting. Okay, so first of all, we are the Canadian Association for Equality. Our motto is equality. It means equality for everyone. We're not ideologically based. We don't have an ideological position. We don't call ourselves a men's rights organization or men's rights activists. In fact, we don't think there is such a thing as men's rights. Okay, there are only human rights. Okay, it's not a ghetto issue. Men don't have special rights. Everybody has a right to freedom of speech, to safety, process of law, and those kinds of things. We're evidence-based. We look at the facts. We're not interested in rhetoric or ideology, okay? We're trying to host inclusive, comprehensive discussions in public, including in universities, which are supposed to be centers of learning. It's too bad that what our main issue in the last year has not been trying to discuss or present our point of view, but getting the right to actually express it. Okay, so we think it's too bad in this country, in this day and age, that we're not allowed to have an open discussion. Some people say to us, well, we're a hate group. I've seen this. Ryerson was not allowed to start a men's rights organization with our help because it sounded like a hate group to the Students' Union. Sounded like a hate group. If you look at our site, CAFE, I would challenge anybody to find any hate language on there, anything on there. So again, we're asking for, we believe it's time to stop with the notion that there's a gender war between men and women, okay? And can we just have like a respectful conversation about these issues? Some of the pushback I've gotten is, well, there is no men's problems. It's the patriarchy runs everything. Just briefly let me say that in this country, 97% of custody orders are made against fathers. 97%, was statistically 100%. 77% of sole custody orders are granted to mothers. The majority of homeless people are men. Men are dropping in all kinds of areas. So we don't have a big ideological, theoretical point we're trying to make. All we're asking is, can we just look at this and can we discuss it amongst ourselves? And do men have the right to discuss that, to host discussions themselves? Can we just please do that? We're just asking for that respect. We don't have the right answers. Nobody has the right answer. And so we're just asking for a respectful conversation, and that's what these events are about. And finally, I'd just like to end by saying that we don't get any, we're not funded by the patriarchy. We don't have any big, international groups or corporations. Nobody will come near us, frankly. We're not funded by the government, by foundations, by corporations. So, you know where this is going, right? We need you. All of us stuff. We just had to pay a $964 security fee to have this because of the disruption we had last time, right? So we're trying to start our own center, a physical location where we can operate out of the Canadian Centre for Men and Families. There's lots on our website. We have lots of information here. If you're welcome to join us afterwards at O'Grady's, and we'll talk more about it. But we will be asking for donations. We need them. It's the only people that can help us with this are you. Frankly, that's it. So sorry to put the pressure on you, but we don't have any big sugar daddies that we can go to. So I guess that's it. And on that note, I will turn it over to Justin again. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael and Hillary. I just wanted to add one quick rejoinder, which is that, as I hope you're coming to appreciate, the Canadian Association for Equality and the campus groups are extremely diverse, extremely inclusive, strive to be both of those things. The Ryerson Equality Association, which was banned, was actually would have been run by two young women at that university, and many of our campus clubs are run by a combination of men and women. It's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to speak here. I've kind of been a little bit in the shadows for similar reasons that a lot of people are when it comes to these issues. I was worried that it would hurt me either personally or professionally, and then I realized that there was nothing at all wrong with talking about boys' issues or men's issues, and that it was a bit, I felt personally hypocritical. If that were true, then I should be open about where I was positioned on many of these issues. And so now I'm in front of you giving some comments. I will just say right off the bat, as Hillary mentioned, she's into social media and Cafe is in a big way. So we are on Twitter. If any of you are tweeting as we have this event, you can use @EqualityCanada, that's our handle, or hashtag Canadian CMF, that's for Canadian Centre for Men and Families, which is specifically for the campaign that I'm going to talk a little bit about. So on Friday of last week, the Cafe announced that our affiliate group, the U of T Men's Issues Awareness Society, was being mandated to pay that $964 fee that's been referred to pay for 4 police officers or essentially have the event canceled. Now, as many of you know, at our previous 3 events, we've had to proceed despite protesters trying to undermine the event with illegal behavior, like blocking exit doors or pulling fire alarms. Still good. It's good. We made the announcement on Friday about all of this. By Monday morning, we had raised 6 times that amount to make this event a go. So I want to thank all of you, many of you in this audience were contributors, and we appreciate that. We couldn't have done it without you, so I want to clap to you. Thank you. We had hundreds of men and women around the world stepping up to make sure that this event proceeded, because you understood something that I'm hoping the administration here gets, that rewarding law-breaking rioters by canceling events that they disapprove of will not make the university a safer place. It will lead to more censorship, and it will risk making the university much, much more dangerous. So you all understood that, and I'm so grateful that you did. Today's National Post editorial one of the editorials anyway, had a headline saying, quote, "Move over abortion, men's issues are the new taboo topics on campus." The Canadian Federation of Students indeed has already passed a motion to ban all men's issues groups at Canadian universities. One of their targets, as I've mentioned, was the Ryerson Equality Association, headed by 2 young women. Ironically, the Ryerson Student Union passed a motion to refuse to recognize any group on their campus that failed to censure women's voices, and then immediately violated their own policy by prohibiting a group, the Ryerson Equality Association, which would have censored 2 women's voices. So it's become a bigger issue than gender, or than any one particular gender. It's certainly a men's issue, and, as we're seeing increasingly, a women's issue. And it's also a bigger issue than just a gender issue itself. Yesterday it was abortion, now it's gender, tomorrow it might be some special issue to you. And that's why the Canadian Association for Equality's fight for free speech on campus is really all of our fight. It's something we all have to engage in. We also want you all to be engaged in our campaign to establish the Canadian Centre for Men and Families, which has been referred to a few times already. We launched the campaign in June. The minimum we wanted to raise was $50,000. We're going strong. We've raised just under $35,000. So I'm sort of making that official announcement right now. That is where the total stands at the current time. But we continue to need your help to make sure that this is successful. And as you can see, there's now a real sense of urgency behind this. While we are committed to continuing to make a real difference by being active at campuses, not just at U of T, but at all universities in Canada, it's become increasingly clear that it is absolutely necessary to continue to have these conversations, that we have a home. We believe that our long-term success requires a home, a place for all of us, where programs are not subject to harassment or to perpetual threat of cancellation because we may not be able to afford what I'm calling the free speech fee. Ironically, I think the injustices that we face in organizing this event in particular and previous events have actually made the case perfectly for a men's center, on and off campus. We need a home where we can lead campus outreach into every university. We already have groups at U of T and at York, and at the University of Guelph, and this semester we're pleased to announce we'll be forming groups at Ryerson, at Waterloo, and at Western, and some other schools as well. They need our support, and we need your support. So please make a financial contribution, in any amount you can afford, to the campaign to establish the Canadian Centre for Men and Families. Due to the recent brouhaha we've experienced, we're extending the matching campaign to the end of September, so September 30th. So tonight and this weekend, your donations, your memberships will continue to be doubled by our donor. Please help us to recruit members and donors from among your friends, family, colleagues, or any other concerned citizens. You were handed as you walked in a little half a pager. Folded inside that is an envelope. So we're asking you before you go, if you support these principles, please make a contribution. You can put anything you like in there within reason, and we'll gladly take those from you when you leave. Your contribution will also support ongoing educational events, and we're very pleased to announce that we will have James Brown as our next speaker, talking about the boys' crisis in education. Jim, are you in the room? I think he might still be outside. Anyways, many of you would have met Jim, he's by the tables. We're also very pleased to announce that we have in the audience the famous blogger Girl Writes What, Karen Strawn, and could I ask see if I get that kind of ovation. I think not. She, I believe, has consented to join us for a talk at a date to be determined, probably in early next year. So we're extremely pleased with this caliber of talent that we're bringing to Toronto. Promise I'm almost done. So just finally, our aim really is to build a positive movement to change people's lives. Critics often claim that we just complain, we don't have any solutions. The Centre for Men and Families is our solution. We're looking to be both broad in terms of the issues we take on, and also to offer a depth in terms of the programmatic approaches that we bring to men's and boys' issues. We will include contextualized research featuring multiple perspectives on these issues, something that's badly needed in the gender discourse. We will have, of course, educational events, social community services, multimedia, and discussion groups that encourage thoughtful and informed conversation and empower men and boys and everybody to improve positive communication skills. See, one of the central challenges that we face as a movement is the cultural burdens of manliness. It's hard for men to ask for help, even when a situation is dire. Earl Silverman's situation was dire. Earl had dedicated his life to raising awareness of male victims of intimate partner violence, and for 20 years he persisted to lobby government at all levels to fund this dream. Unfortunately, he felt he had been unsuccessful in this life's pursuit and ended up hanging himself on the night of April 26th of this year. CAFE is undertaking the campaign to establish the Canadian Centre for Men and Families in honor of Earl Silverman, because unfortunately Earl didn't ask for help. Asking for help is difficult for many men. Well, I am a man, and I am asking all of you for help, because we need it if we're going to build the Canadian Centre for Men and Families. So please contribute what you can and find any other way to get involved in this. Hope to see you later tonight at the reception that we're hosting at O'Grady's, and we're going to play now a 2-minute video. I promise it's very short, that we spent a good long time putting together, which will be put up on a Indiegogo campaign, a crowdfunding campaign this weekend, which will feature the video and feature the poster, which is sitting here and is behind me and outside, which are also available for purchase, and of course the funds go to the campaign. So 2 minutes to show the video, and then Miles, I promise, is coming right up here. I'm going to ask Steve and Nick, if you're in the house, come up, help me launch the video, and Mark, if you could give me a hand with the tech. Okay, can we dim the lights? Or oh, they're right there.
As judge of this case, I award sole custody to the mother.
I don't care if you're scared. You've got a job to do.
We do not believe your son is a proper candidate for university.
You're unbelievable, pathetic. I can't believe I married you.
No one is invincible. Isn't it about time there was a place for him and the people in his life? The Canadian Centre for Men and Families. A place for education. A place for advocacy. A place for services. A place for outreach. The Canadian Centre for Men and Families. A place whose time has come.
I should introduce these fine folks. This is Steve and Nick, who were among the production team putting on the video. And I don't know if Jamie Warner's in the house or not. Here's Jamie. Hey Jamie, you can come down if you'd like. We spent a lot of time on this. These folks did all the work, so they really deserve a round of applause.
I'm usually behind the camera, but Justin asked me to say something about the video. First of all, I want to thank, we had like 30 or 40 people really working, even on a small video like this, so thanks everybody for the hard work. Jamie was our producer, Nick and I directed and DOP'd the thing. There was, as you saw, the list of credits, quite a lot of people. I'm not associated with any of the groups. I came across Justin through a documentary I was doing. And when I found out about the PSA and their efforts here, I was interested in this partly because the issue of suicide is a big one for me. About a dozen years ago when I was going through divorce and separation, the taking away your child, your son, is probably the most crazy experience that I've ever had. And at that time, there was a couple of guys I knew and worked with that had committed suicide, had hung themselves like Earl did. And one of the fellows I worked with, his brother, committed suicide, and he was concerned about me because of what I was going through at the time. Excuse me. So he came over and visited me, and I wasn't really prepared for a visit. I didn't think I really needed a visit. But over the years that I was dealing with the divorce and separation, a whole pile of other things that go along with that, I always remembered that he thought enough to come and visit. So he was the only guy I knew that if I felt I had to talk to somebody, he would listen, he'd be there. His brother went through a very difficult divorce, and he was not allowed to see his kids. And that went on for 4 or 5 years because they couldn't take it. And they found him hanging in the garage, in the barn. And right just about after that time as well, there was another fella who was a colleague going through a divorce, and they found him hanging in his hallway in his house. And I was in the company gym, had a good job at the time, and we were on the treadmill, and a couple of my female colleagues were jogging beside me. And this was a very difficult thing to be hearing about. And the main concern that I overheard my colleagues saying is that it was insensitive of him to hang himself where his daughter might find him. And there was never expressed in any of those conversations I heard at the workplace any concern that here's a guy who was literally at the end of his rope. So, and I didn't know there was anything like a men's movement. I didn't know how to put a name to this callous feeling towards men in difficulties. And it actually is only in the last few months when I heard about the concept of the disposable man that it started to make sense to me. So I was very happy to be involved with this project because it's an issue close to my heart, and I hope that Cafe is successful with the Men's Center. Thanks.
Thanks everybody for coming out. It was a pleasure to be associated with, I thought, such a professional production. I want to thank everyone who was involved with us for this important campaign. I think we will exceed our target quite optimistically, and I'd like to give credit to the photographer who's present, Deborah Prodicelli. Hi Deb, can you stand up? It was a very positive, a lot of good energy, and I'm looking forward to additional campaigns and more professional videos. Thank you very much.
anticipate speaking. I just think that my involvement in this video is to do with the fact that I believe that everyone should have a voice, and at no point, no matter what the conversation is, should that person be shut out. And that I think that the amount of negative attention that this group has faced is really unfortunate, and to me, especially as a woman who comes into a group like this, I feel that I've had a lot of volleys put against me for the fact that it's somehow even more ridiculous for me to be stepping into this, and that's an opinion that needs to change. Taking part in this video just really helped me in stepping in to see who the members of the group were. And my first step into this, into Cafe, was with this video. And so what I learned from that is that everyone's just a person. And I don't think that's such a difficult concept, but for some it is. And I understand that there's a lot of cultural and societal pressures that make that very difficult for other people to accept. So in the future, I hope that I'll work on more projects with Cafe, and I'll meet more people who are just people. They're not men or women. They're just people that I'd like to get to know and have things that they want to say and that they don't want to be shut out. So it's a pleasure working with everyone on this video, and thank you very much.
Hello again. I'll make this as brief as I possibly can. I just wanted to thank Cafe for all of their words and, of course, all of their ongoing support. Without Cafe, the UTMIA would simply not exist, at least in the form that it exists in today. So without further ado, we'll get on to the main event. So our speaker today is a professor of psychology from from Wagner College, and that's on Staten Island in New York. He's particularly interested in psychotherapy and the psychology of men and boys. He's written extensively on the topic. He is the co-editor of Engaging College Men, which is an anthology of case studies written on the subject. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Miles Groth. So Miles Groth, please join me.
What's gone before, I think what's gone before is probably better than what you're going to hear from me. But know that this is heartfelt and very much in the spirit of what Justin and the group are doing. I won't give a very, very long talk so that there's some time for so that there's some time for Q&A. And this, I think, I caught on the plane coming over this afternoon. So bear with me, and if I'm not being heard, yell out so that I can be heard. 1 week ago, I should say 1 week before the beginning of the new semester at Wagner College, where I teach, a young man entering his senior year arrived on campus to join other residential education staff in greeting incoming freshmen. The first day of classes, August 26, he finished his last class, and in the late afternoon took the campus shuttle to the Staten Island ferry. He had not returned to campus by late that night, but at 5:30 a.m. the following morning, he phoned his roommate to say he was in Van Cortlandt Park, as far away from campus as he could be and still be in New York City. Those of you who know New York, that's the tip of the Bronx. He said he was groggy and confused. That was the end of the conversation. Later that day, his mother phoned the college to say that police had found his dead body among the rocks up in the park. Next to him was a suicide note and an empty bottle of pills, which evidently he had taken just before calling his friend. Well, that was 1 month ago today, to the day. It is still not known what he wrote in the notes. This much, however, we do know. He had been unable to put into words for his parents, his best friend, or anyone else what was on his mind. Evidently not even his doctor, since he had gone into the city for a checkup at 5:30. His name was Justin. Like so many boys his age, and I use the word boys for this 22-year-old because they use the word, and so did the girls who like them. Like many boys his age, while he was outgoing, popular, funny, he contained within him feelings and ideas that he could not or would not share with others. The suicide rate for boys Justin's age is 4 times that of girls in the States, and that seems to be pretty much the case throughout North America, Europe. Over the last 15 years or so, it has increased. Moreover, younger boys, as young as 14 or 15, are now committing suicide, something unheard of in earlier generations, for example, when I was at college in the 60s. The numbers are probably higher, especially when we realize that so-called accidents among boys in their late teens and early 20s are often disguised suicidal gestures, driving a car recklessly, competitive drinking are common examples. Well, I've come to Toronto to talk about boys Justin's age, boys at university, or as we say in the States, college-age boys. And there's some here tonight. And if we had had movable seats, I had thought to invite a couple to come up here and sit beside me while I was talking, but can't do that. My aim is to stimulate interest in their lives in order to understand a number of trends that, if not fatal, are sometimes noxious and toxic for young males on campus. Some boys are doing well, but too many are not. For example, at a time when a university degree is essential for most well-compensated work, young men are enrolling in college and university at the lowest rate on record. You can't find a figure that says, in one source, that says this is the proportion of males to females. You have to extrapolate from a variety of sources. So doing that, extrapolating from many sources of statistics on attendance of institutions of higher education of all kinds, here in Canada, in the States, and elsewhere in Europe, Australia, and even in Asia, the most conservative estimate is 43% attendance by males at this point. The small liberal arts college where I teach, it's officially 37%. Directors of admissions know it is even lower, now approaching 35% internationally in developed countries. Head counts reveal the obvious to university college instructors. Every instructor at university knows that in most classes, roughly for every boy in a class, there are 2 girls. As I'll argue in absolute terms, this is not good for boys, but it is also not good for girls, for universities, or for the culture as a whole. It is especially worrisome for the small liberal arts college, a unique institution in the United States, I know, where it's known that a tipping point of 40% attendance of males means that girls will soon not want to go there. They like boys and the presence of males, straight, gay, or otherwise, on campus. It's important to them. Wanting that, they look elsewhere, and the school suffers financially. If girls in the States, for example, want an all-female environment, they may choose from among 48 all-women's colleges that are overseen by the National Women's College Coalition. There is no National Men's College Coalition, since there are now only 3 all-men's colleges. Incidentally, all men's colleges were very common until 1970. I attended one from 1964 to 68 in Pennsylvania. In 1969, the year after I graduated, many schools went co-ed. The reasons for doing so were complicated, but they included a bonanza of attendance of women at university that was much welcomed, and no school wanted to fail to profit from the largesse. Altogether, the all-male colleges now serve only about 6,400 men. To put this in a broader context, in 1960, the current ratio of female to male that I mentioned, 2 to 1, was what it is now, as I've just mentioned, for male to female attendance, 2 to 1. By 1980, parity had been reached, 50-50, roughly equivalent in 1980. A lot had happened, most of it had been really, really positive and happened very quickly. Given the current trend, which has been identified since the mid-90s by admissions directors, and I've talked to them about this, not read sources, because they know, they meet nationally every year, they compare notes. According to them, if you do a statistical projection, the last male to be awarded a bachelor's degree in the United States will turn his tassel in about 50 years. Is this likely to happen? I won't be here. Many of you will see. If the trend persists, what that means then in that broader context is that over a 100-year period we'll have seen the near disappearance of men at university. The trend has made a difference already, so much so that most master's and doctorate students are now predominantly female in the United States and Canada and the UK. One of my former students, now finishing his doctorate in psychology at a major New York university, reports that among his cohort of about 10 doctoral candidates, there are 7 women and 3 men, and since they all communicate with each other across the country in similar programs, that's pretty much the same situation everywhere. Now to some other matters. Once on campus, and I'll talk mostly about the American scene because it may not be as familiar to you as the Canadian scene, and because I'm not as equipped to talk about the Canadian scene, but perhaps that'll be instructive to hear about things in the States. Once on campus, boys will be subject to what's called Title IX guidelines. Having passed its 40th anniversary last year, Title IX is a federal law in the States that dictates the allocation of money and services to boys and girls in equal proportion to their rates of attendance. This was a momentous piece of legislation. It covers all areas of university, management of resources, but it's best known in athletics, where the proportion of students by sex at a given institution must be reflected in the availability of sports programs, teams, to men and women respectively. The way this plays out is that if there are fewer males than females on campus, say, as is the case at Wagner, the number of male sports teams must be reduced to match the proportion of males to females. So just a quick example, when Title IX was in effect and the decrease had increased, they had to get rid of the wrestling team in order to have the appropriate allocation of sports money and opportunities. Arriving on campus is something else to think about. Arriving on campus, boys will also see the effects of women's studies programs, now usually termed gender studies programs. Make no mistake about it, however, they are still women's studies programs. I teach in the gender studies program at Wagner, and there are 16 faculty. 14 are women, and 2 of us are men, and one of them retired at the end of May. So they're predominantly staffed and predominantly geared to women's studies courses. Those programs, there are about 900 such programs worldwide, and about 400 of them are in the States. I did a bit of looking. There are 45 in Canadian universities, including, I believe, the University of Toronto, 35 in the UK, and 15 in Australia. So you see that the bulk of these are in the States. By comparison to those 900 programs worldwide, gender studies programs, women's studies programs, there is 400 of them in the States. There are 400 in the States. By comparison, there is 1 men's studies program, and that's at Hobart William Smith College in New York. Its orientation is complex, but its relation to the women's studies program is stated explicitly in its mission statement. In 4 years, this seems to be good news. In 4 years, a Center for Men and Masculinities is to be established at a State of New York university, the one at Stony Brook on Long Island. It's to be funded by a large grant of $300,000 from a well-known philanthropic foundation. It will be headed by Professor Michael Kimmel, a sociologist. Its advisors will include, and probably among the advisors are funders as well, the actress and fitness expert Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and Eve Ensler, the author of the Vagina Monologues. I mention that only because this is very much characteristic of most, this is part of the offerings of many women's studies courses, perhaps not all of them, but according to Ms. Ensler's website, thousands of schools see productions of her play. It's likely that most of the boys on campus will be encouraged and, in fact, supported by the administration to attend production of this play. I can't judge its dramatic qualities, but I think it's important to realize that it presents a strong message on behalf of women. But I'll say something now just in contrast to that in a minute. Another item. During the first year student orientation week, by the way, the word freshman has been replaced on most campuses because it contains the word man. We speak now of first year students, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. During this first year student orientation week, boys will sit in on required co-ed seminars about male on female date rape. They will be portrayed in these as potentially dangerous and apprised of the policies governing accusations of unwanted sexual approaches towards girls on campus. That these policies are based on the principle guilty and proven innocent might seem unreasonable, but it has actually turned out to be that way. Illustrated recently by cases on several campuses, including one of the Ivy League schools. One such case was reported a few months ago in the New York Times by a young man's mother, who happens to be an attorney. The mother has challenged the university on the fairness of treatment of her son, who it turned out had done nothing wrong. Incoming freshmen, as I said, will see that most women's studies programs include a women's center. By contrast, and so that would be in the hundreds. By contrast, there are currently only 9 men's centers in the world. 8 of them in the States, 1 of them in the UK, and I hope a few here in Canada soon. The status of fledgling centers here in Canada is, according to recent information, problematic. I think Justin referred to the situation at Ryerson, and at best, precarious. That's the word, by the way, that I favor to describe the situation in general for boys on campus. While women's centers have been in existence for decades, the first men's center opened in 2006 and has now closed for want of funding. And this was St. John's University in Minneapolis, near Minneapolis, which is a Benedictine college with all male, with an adjacent all women's college, the College of St. Benedict. The second oldest at Wagner College, I'm proud to say, remains open. I'll tell you about it. I'll tell you more about it in a moment. Membership in these programs that I've just mentioned, the small number of programs, is small, usually under a dozen. This is because currently the centers are at best tolerated and ignored, and at worst mocked, making them places that are undesirable for young men to be known to have an association with. I hope that will change. Well, there you've seen some of the background of campus men's centers to date. Their history is brief, only about 7 years, and the prospects, until recently, have been dim. But, and this is why I'm here tonight, I'm convinced that increasing their numbers is essential, and that the time is ripe to do so. I would like to see a men's center on every campus of every college and university in Canada and the United States very, very soon. I've described the situation for college men as precarious. Some speak of it as critical. This word crisis has been used. That there's a crisis for young men and boys, if not also for most males. I agree with this assessment, but I would like to remind you of what crisis means in its basic sense. If you look at the word itself. A crisis is a turning point. That's the original meaning, that's the fundamental meaning of the word. A turning point, for example, in a disease or a drama. In medicine, for example, it refers to the moment in the natural history of a disease when a fever breaks, for example, and the organism starts to get better. Of course, the organism may also die. That happens when the organism is too weak to fight back. In drama, it is that episode in the story, in the play, when the outcome of the story is determined. Well, I think of the present crisis for young men on college campuses, on university campuses, as such a moment. I see the crisis young men face as that episode in the history of women and men, boys and girls, civilized life itself, which I think still is represented remarkably well by university life, during which how things will turn out for us all, males and females living together in community, is being determined. I see university campuses as the stage on which the action of this episode is unfolding. Thinking of the many young men I've mentored in the last 40 years, I've been in the classroom for 40 years. I'm impressed by the ones, especially in recent years, who show remarkable vitality in the face of an often noxious and even toxic sociocultural and educational environment. I'm optimistic, however, that given our support, the silent ones, like Justin, will come to and be reinvigorated. Like him, they are the majority. I know that, I know them, and I know that from colleagues who tell me the same stories about the guys who are in their classes and the ones they see on campus. And we will have to be generous in our support of them. It will take a great deal of our effort and care. The care is in the title of my talk. Responsible parents, university faculty and administrators, policymakers, mentors, and yes, advocates will have to speak out on their behalf to jumpstart a renewal of involvement in campus life for young men. Centers for University Men are the place where this will begin, I believe. Now mostly quiet boys will begin to talk about their experience on campus and before, when they were little boys, and on their way through high school to university, and in the wider world of other young men. If they're permitted to and encouraged to do so, if they're permitted and encouraged to do so, I believe they will thrive, they will come to. In turn, these young men will carry a new outlook back home to their younger brothers and male friends and to their fathers, and forward into their lives after university as friends of men, as male partners of women, and as fathers of sons. So, let me review why such centers are necessary and tell you how to build one. To address the first part, I'll revisit some of what I've just said. Why are university centers for men necessary? First, as I've already indicated, there are fewer men on campus, and so they need to have a place to talk about why they are now in the minority. I may be able to guess at why we are seeing the trends I've reported, but only the boys themselves can tell us what their experience is that has produced this trend and turned them off and turned them away. I like to think of a men's center on campus as a place where the silence most males have learned since childhood, and may also be part of very deep-lying tendencies related to being male. In some of the anecdotes we heard just a little while ago, that seems pretty obvious. How this might be lifted, at least on the matter of how they see themselves and are being seen by administrators, faculty, the other boys on campus, and by their female counterparts. Second, a perspective on being male must be provided that confronts the contrasts with that which nearly all universities now provide. An audible and visible male-positive presence must be foregrounded. Study groups on the topic of the well-being of boys and men are places where that presence can be established. Even if there is only the plan for such a center and such a group, there will be a positive effect on the campus. It is important for a discussion to be opened that could lead to establishing a men's center. I want to stress that in the short term, even if there is only a discussion going on among administrators and faculty, and the young men themselves most of all, about the need for such a center, the atmosphere on campus will change. Third, the curriculum and co-curriculum have changed. I mentioned some of that at the beginning, in important ways in the past 30 years. In an effort to point out that history is the legacy of a small group of males. This is true, right? In an effort to point out that history is the legacy of a small group of males. No doubt that's true. Changes have been made in courses in the social sciences and humanities, history, sociology, psychology, most of all. What has been left unsaid, however, is that the lives of most men, not those few men who made history, the lives of most men, like the lives of most women, have not been and are not now characterized by real power. As Warren Farrell pointed out many years ago in The Myth of Male Power, if real power is power over one's life, most men have been and are impotent. That a few men have been extraordinarily dominant in society misses the point, that most men have been without real power. To allow the means for finding access to such power to diminish, to not permit that to diminish even further, especially for young men, this cannot be tolerated, it seems to me. I'm here to ask that we respond to the weakening of means for young men to achieve personal power over their lives, as that is related to their life at university. University boys are asked to participate in Take Back the Night, Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, Wear a White Ribbon. These are worthy, consciousness-raising activities. Perhaps also Miss Ensler's play. I'm not sure. But where are there, in balance, events that consider the high suicide rate of young men, for example, or the missing father in so many boys' lives, or the dismal performance of small boys as readers in elementary school? Moreover, where is there a tribute to the positive contribution average men, the blokes, as the Australians say, have made and are making? The building we're sitting in, the roads that got us here, the metal fabricated from mined ores that hold up the building and span the rivers out there. These were and are provided almost entirely by the effort and design of men who hauled nearly every bit of food from farm to market to the dining halls here at the University of Toronto, and who will lift the empty over full trash receptacles later tonight. Casual glance outside in the early morning hours and late at night will reveal that it was almost always a man, often a young man. Fourth, college men are known to be less involved in extracurricular life, civic engagement, volunteerism, campus government, journalism, and other outlets for creative work. They are visible for the most part only on playing fields. For example, the pretty dangerous green of American college football, but hardly anywhere else today. And that was the topic of the book that I edited with Gar Kellum from St. John's University, Engaging College Men, Discovering What Works and Why, because there was the research that their engagement had just declined to be almost non-existent. In there you can find data that show how relatively little men by comparison to women are involved in extracurricular activities, self-discernment programs. By the way, the notion of self-discernment, you should look in this book, refers to reflection on one's calling in life. As studies have shown, college boys pay fairly little attention to this, something, by the way, that is independent of scoping out job opportunities, talking about reflecting on what do I really want to do with my life, not what job is going to be available for me until I figure out what I really want to do in my life. They seem not to care about the future in a certain way, and I think this is a symptom of the atmosphere that they experience on campus. The psychologists would say their future is foreshortened. We should be very concerned about this. Finally, as academia has become a place where activism, masked as research sometimes, mingles with scholarship, certain ideological commitments have bypassed and overlooked the interests and well-being of young men on campus. The university, for someone of my generation, is not the place for activism by any group. It wasn't my experience. It has become that in many places. I think this is something that will change, and I think that we'll look back on a period of time and see that there was something amiss there. It should, I think, be what it was intended to be, a forum for the reasoned exchange of ideas, temperate debate, and cautious conclusions. Hope this is a model for that. Otherwise, it becomes more like a seminary, if you think about it, where a belief system operating in the background orders the curriculum. Well, the net result of these developments that I've just listed on campuses, its effects to males, can be best summarized as an ambience, an atmosphere, a socio-cultural atmosphere, an intellectual atmosphere, in which college men have come to feel unwelcome. That would be the second key word. Precarious is the situation, the feeling is unwelcome. And just at a time, of course, when the press is reporting on the presumptive, quote, end of men and the superfluous of males in an economy in a world that no longer needs traditionally male qualities such as physical strength to make it run. By the way, where are the boys going who used to go to college at a time when a college degree has come to be required for more and more entry-level positions? Some are living with their parents for as long as they can. Others are moving from place to place, following minimum wage employment offers. But that leaves many unaccounted for. Some economists argue that these young men are better off than the ones who have completed a bachelor's degree and head into the world with $100,000 in loan debt. That's typical in the States. And no prospects of employment. These economists judge that part of the decline in male attendance at college is a certain common sense about the realities of the job market. I have no evidence that acting on the option not to go to university is a sensible thing for young men to do, since the degree is a lifetime credential and its earning power and dollar value will change as the economy improves. The larger picture, of course, is probably more important than any of that as we seek for ways of intersexual dialogue. The larger picture is one of women's likely alienation from less credentialed prospective partners. A woman will be less inclined to want to pair up with a man who cannot earn as much as she can, especially if the decision is taken to start a family. I see only more uncertain, alienated young men who feel of less value in not having pursued and acquired that first post-secondary degree, no matter whether there is an employer ready to hire them. In uncertain times, it is still important to have the option of attending university and making the most of the time. But what if it is a place where one feels unwelcome, unimportant, and suspect even? Those boys who are there need the validation of their voices and a place on campus, a campus community that is aware of the difficulties they uniquely face now as never before, and is open to hearing about their experience. A university men's center can provide this. I'll turn now to the components of a men's center. Last part. No two centers will be entirely alike, but the best of them will share some common features. First, a university center for men should provide an opportunity for informal study groups that meet regularly. Twice a month is enough. With the permission of the university, a faculty mentor will arrange for a place where men can meet. He or she may offer a short list of possible topics, the mentor. He or she may offer a short list of possible topics in the form of questions, which I've seen in 6 years to invariably include some of the following, or most of the following. How are we, young men, seen on campus? How do we see ourselves here? What is it to be a male in contemporary society? Whether he's a young man like us, a man already established in a trade or profession, or a boy entering elementary school. What is life like for most men now out there? Those our age who are not in college and those who are older. What about fathers? What was my father's life like? What was my experience with my own father? Do I have it in me to be a father? What would that be like? What would that mean? And if I did not know the presence of a father, what did that mean to me? By the way, in the States, you may know that the divorce rate is 50%. And if there is a son custody battle, 2 out of 3 times the mother will be awarded the joy and responsibility of raising the couple's son on her own, but as a single mom, which is difficult. Other questions? How are my relationships with girls on campus? How do they see us? And since there are some young men who are drawn sexually and romantically to other males, the question is sometimes raised about same-sex relationships. A fundamental question that inevitably turns up in the discussions is this: how do I feel about my relationships with male friends? There is an intimacy in these relationships that men desire. It is not sexual, but it runs very, very deep. In fact, some of that kind of experience is generated in the study groups I'm describing. In the past, these relationships were formed only among athletes and in fraternities on campuses. Study groups for men on campus are similar to those institutions, if we'll call them that, but with this difference: the members are typically very diverse. A little bit about Wagner. Example. Wagner College was able to sponsor retreats in addition to the study groups, which I see to be the heart of a men's center. We were able to sponsor retreats for small groups of men who met at the center. This is that second element that I've just mentioned, the opportunity each semester to spend a weekend off campus with other young men. Talking about these experiences, as I said, I was able to provide for 4 years. I'll tell you perhaps about the last 2 years. The boys who participated in such retreats reported, quote, good times. Provided with a place in the country, a small private retreat center near Bard College, about 3 hours from campus. They traveled to it together, bought food, made music, played chess, walked in the woods, and at my suggestion, tried to observe 1 or 2 protocols. No cell phones from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Try that out one day and see if it works. And an invitation to each of the boys to be responsible for an hour during the weekend to lead a discussion, play music, demonstrate a skill, cooking, paddling, canoeing. Believe me, I know that there was much officially unsanctioned, unofficially silly behavior during such retreats, but trusting to the basic good sense of these boys, I'm happy to say that everyone stayed safe and every retreat was a success. They looked after each other. They lived together for a period of time, and no doubt the most important conversations did not take place during any organized hours. These retreats set the stage for forming deep relationships after the young men returned to campus. Many of these relationships have continued beyond graduation. For 4 years, I was also able to pay for an annual dinner for the group at the close of the school year. This, I think, is an important element of the men's center's offerings. It was the only time each year that I met with the group as a whole. Meanwhile, of course, I saw each of these guys individually, informally throughout the year from time to time. A group of these graduates who were part of that men's center now meet regularly online. The website, www.collegemenscenters.com, and the Facebook page, College and University Centers for Men, have become points of reference for some of the men following graduation too. And as you all know, the social media are very powerful in reinforcing experiences. Part of the strength of the development of such centers, I think, will be derived from the social media that will follow their activity. We've only begun to see the prospects offered by this. As I've suggested, a university center for men can be effective in its mere visibility, no matter how active it is at the beginning. This is important to keep in mind. At Wagner, it doesn't have to be a big, spacious place. At one school I visited, Gustavus Adolphus. It was a former one-time closet for the cleanup crew. But they used it and enjoyed being in there. At Wagner, the center is my office, and one seminar room reserved 4 hours a month for group meetings. A sign under my name above my door, Men's Center, tells the campus community a great deal about what should be important to everyone. I will have something to say about logistics and the response of the wider campus community in just a second. I chose the name Sodality for our center. It's a good old word that means brotherhood and fellowship. Other schools have named their group the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and MPACT. The center should, I think, have an identity and a logo. They'll find some good ones. A men's center should try whenever possible to extend its reach beyond campus. At Wagner, I did this by making a connection with the University of South Australia, which went on to sponsor a graduate of the college for a 3-month paid postgraduate research and living experience at the Whyalla campus of the university. The student must pay for transportation to and from Australia. All other expenses are carried by the university. While there, the young man is engaged in research. There's currently one alumnus of that program, and a second arrangement is being made at this time. The research project of the first postgraduate was on the effects of rural men of extended employment stays away from home and family. So they generally are doing research that's related to boys and men and their well-being. The center also experimented with reaching out to young high school boys from the poorest area of Staten Island, which you may know is a borough of New York City, where Wagner College is located. It's an island just 20 minutes from Manhattan, from the tip of Manhattan. With parental permissions in place, we brought mostly African American middle school age boys to campus, where our men spent afternoons with them on the basketball courts, in the gym, and on the oval, and in the dining room. The campus, it's called the Hawk's Nest. It's just a small eating area. Many of these boys had never been in a gymnasium, had never seen any equipment. Some had not eaten at a sit-down table, a diner, or played on a spacious grassy field. Some had never handled a Frisbee. Well, this sort of civic engagement by our small group of men was not unnoticed by the college. Young men at other schools recounted in engaging college men have worked in similar ways with boys in their local communities. Briefly then, these are the major elements of a university men's center. Time permitting, I'd like to read an account of the beginnings of our men's center and of its and the personalities of those who were active in it. We'll see. But the logistics. What about the logistics in setting up such a program? It's necessary to gain the support of the president or dean of the university. I was easily able to convince our president of the value of a men's center at Wagner College. And I'm sure he has never regretted giving me the okay. He certainly doesn't regret my being here. His foresight and our friendship carried the day. Conversation followed by an email is all that's required. Easier said than done? Well, if this has happened at 10 schools, it can happen at every college and university. I suggest remaining independent of the club system. This will be good news to administration. We're always understandably concerned about costs. In any event, a men's center is not a club for men, but an organization dedicated to men. It is about men. I see it as part of a greater movement dedicated to ensuring the well-being of boys and men in general. It is not against anything, not anti-anything, anyone, or any group. A men's center nicely complements a women's center on campus. A men's center is not like a fraternity, which generally selects for a kind of person. It's open to anyone, no matter his race, ethnic background. Our groups each year have included athletes, nerds, science majors, philosophy majors. Funding should be sought from alumni. Here, the development office is especially important in providing access to subgroups of alumni who are of an age to have college-age sons and daughters, or sons who are going to be in college in a few years, at university in a few years. An article in the Alumni magazine about the center can go a long way to raising awareness and securing funding. For 2 years, an alumnus and his wife designated gifts totaling $8,000 to support our center. During the 2 startup years, we were lucky to have $10,000 each year for 2 years from the Lilly Endowment, which sponsored the 11 projects that we've written about in that book. This year, a surprise came through the mail, a little gift of $800 for the current semester. Well, that's good. It is important that the group be student-driven. The faculty and mentor should turn over the management of the group to students, all the while monitoring its health. Better that it flounder at first and be secured by student effort. It belongs to them. Each year, I do invite one student to act as the coordinator of the group, the study group. He represents the center during Freshman Orientation Week recruits potentially interested group members and convenes group meetings. The case example of 11 projects at colleges and universities will provide you much more detail on this. In closing, before taking some questions about men's centers, let me summarize what I would like to see happen. And if I have a little time, perhaps, if it's appropriate, read a description of some of the young men who have been part of Wagner's Men's Center during the last 6 years. So, by way of conclusion, I would like to see a men's center, a center for men, on every private college and university campus in 2 years, and within 3 to 5 years, a men's center on every public university campus. It takes them longer to do things. It takes state-run organizations a bit longer, but I'm sure it can happen. This is going to depend on a variety of efforts on behalf of college men, but also on behalf of boys and men in the world surrounding the university, since we're all linked. Last year, as you remember, Warren Farrell spoke about the situation for boys and the need for bolstering their experience in childhood, especially in school. Students in men's centers should discuss that situation. Many will have little brothers, little nephews, little cousins. Men's centers can also be places where much needed real intersexual dialogue begins. Without any agenda except the courtesy and intellectual stability that the university is supposed to provide for discussions about really difficult topics. That sort of dialogue, by the way, that was mentioned by Paul Nathanson and Catherine Young when they spoke here earlier this year. Centers for Men will be places where a voice for college men can be heard. Only these boys can tell us what we really need to know about their experience. This will not come from sophisticated research or scholarly panels or anything that I can say. They will be places where an appeal to fathers and mothers originates on their behalf. When I tell parents what I've told you here tonight, the standard response is one of amazement. This is going on? There are so few boys there now? They simply didn't know. Most are also not aware of changes in the curriculum, the co-curriculum, and the extracurriculum I've described that have taken place since they graduated. I would like to see the beginning of a few new projects based at university centers for men, including meetings of fathers and sons. In no way an advocacy of anything but the importance of the father-son relationship. This was tried at St. John's University, and while the funding lasted, there were 3 years of hugely successful annual father-son banquets, just as an example. 20 years ago, just about the time men started to disappear from university, the British writer Neil Linden published a book called No More Sex Wars. I'm convinced that university campuses can become known as places where peace tables are set up to end harmful and wasteful battles between the sexes. Now's the time to add that the boys I have come to know are nothing like the guys, I'm using a capital, portrayed in a well-known book published 5 years ago. They do not live in a perilous world, as the author termed it, but rather one in which they are stunned and hurt to find that they are less than welcome. We need to understand what has happened and is happening to young men, not paint a picture of them that is inaccurate and punish them further. College campuses are university campuses are the ideal place where such an understanding can be gained. But to understand, we have to hear from our young men. To hear from them, they have to be there. Centers for university men are the places to welcome young men, listen to what they have to say about their experience, and care for their well-being. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'll be opening the floor to various questions from the audience for Dr. Miles Groth. So I believe there is a microphone just right there. If we could form a line of interested members of the audience to ask questions. I just want to go over some of the ground rules, though, of the Q&A session we're going to have. So we're going to limit questions to 45 seconds each. That does force you to be brief. Also, 3 questions will be asked in succession, during which time both of us will be taking notes, and he will answer those 3 questions after each of them have been posited. So,
Can I start?
yes. Oh. Does anyone know if that's...
Maybe I'll just ask the question without the microphone. First of all, thank you very much for talking to us today. My question is, I was wondering if you could give us more detail about why it is that fewer men are attending colleges and universities. Is it because they are going to other places, or is it because there are now more women attending so that the proportion in population is now different?
In absolute numbers, there are just more people going to college. Oh, okay, right.
If that's the end of your question,
That's
we'll have the
the
next...
end of my question. I'm done.
Thank you.
Oh, no, that worked.
Hi, I don't know if everyone can hear me. I think you can all hear me without the mic.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
At least up here.
I actually have a couple of questions, so I'm going to try to.
We do need to limit it to 1. You can return if you'd like, but...
Okay, so I'll ask one question then.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, I know that the men's movement in general is diverse. There's different people believe different things. But from your individual perspective, do you consider yourself some type of feminist or some type of anti-feminist? I'm just wondering if there's a bridge between, your personal beliefs and feminism. And I want to quote something in particular that you said that interested me. You mentioned, for example, men are expected to go into things like football, which are dangerous sports. I'm just curious because I've heard feminists making the same point many times before about how football and many other traditional male sports are dangerous. And when we've made that point, I'm using me because I'm a feminist. When we've made that point, we've been called misandrists. So I'm just wondering, is there a balance? Just wondering. Yeah.
Thank you.
How you doing, Dr. Groth? Dan Parents, Voice for Men News, Ontario. I'd like to ask you, well, first I'd like to state I realize the importance of men's groups being formed on university and college campuses. But in Ontario, they are now teaching gender studies in high schools. And do you think that there should be a male version to complement in the high schools of Ontario? Right.
Thank you.
I'm relying on Dylan's memory. So, the first question I think we got from the fellow who asked, the proportion is absolute. It doesn't have to do with the overall greater numbers of people attending college. Sure, there are many more people attending college, but my point has to do with the representation of men on campus, which has declined even while the numbers of people going, and that means men and women going, have been rising. Am I a feminist or an anti-feminist? No, I'm neither. And I don't consider myself to be a masculinist, there is such a word. I think of myself as a humanist. The background of my own education was in philosophy, and then moved on into psychotherapy, and finally into psychology, particularly now in the last 10 years, psychology of boys and men. And I think perhaps those words have lost some of their power with overuse. That often happens with words. They can be worn out and lose their pizzazz. And because they can mean so many different things, and precision of meaning is lost, to ask that question becomes almost meaningless because there's so many possible ways of reading the meaning of that word. So I would call myself a humanist and see myself interested in the opportunity of everybody to take advantage of the university experience and not be underrepresented, as was the case before 1960 for women, and not to be underrepresented as is the case now for men. Oh, and then the question came about a curriculum at the high schools in was it Ontario? Oh, I'm sorry, in
Ontario,
Yes.
And well, if you're talking about junior high school or senior high school or both, what grades?
I believe that they're starting to offer it at around grade 11.
Grade 11. Okay, well they sort of know
Right
what
now,
gender
but I
is.
believe that they may bring it down to grade 9.
Right. I'm not sure that a lot of my graduating seniors at Wagner know what gender is at this point. And for a couple of reasons. So I'm really doubtful that it would make much sense to talk to 15 or 16-year-olds about gender. We've tended to what I would say call infantilize kids to such an extent that even by that age they haven't begun to take themselves very seriously. By contrast, my father's generation, you took yourself seriously as a man or a woman when you were 15 or 16. So it surprises me that the people who would bring that curriculum into the school system would expect their students to really know what they're talking about. Sex education is something else, right? To know about the parts and pieces, that certainly makes sense, and that's been in place for a long time. But I'd really be interested to read the curriculum before passing on it. My only question is whether kids in our culture at that age really know what that word means and what that could possibly mean.
You can find more information on the Miss G website, and it's quite an interesting read.
I will do that.
There are some.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
We can have the next question at this time.
Yeah, so sometimes I find myself arguing with my profs about my marks, right? Do you ever think that some faculty will undergrade undesirable students to weed them out?
Okay, thank you. And next question in succession.
No, it's just that question.
Yeah.
Okay, the next, yes, next participant. Thank you.
Next question, me? Hi, my name is Dean Esme. I have a question for Professor Groth. I'm pleased to see a growing awareness that there really are legitimate men's issues and that they are being discussed on college campuses for the purpose of a liberal education is to discuss exactly these issues. One of the things that I, as a father, am finding particularly disturbing, however, is a group of what I would call truly hateful and bigoted so-called men's advocates like Michael Kimmel and Hugo Schweitzer, who teach vicious, hateful, bigoted lies like men perpetuate a rape culture of women and need to be taught to stop dominating and oppressing women. I find these toxic and hateful and want them kept as far away from my children's education as I can. Yet they're opening a school of so-called men's studies that are teaching young men to hate themselves. And how do we address this? That's all my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Orla, and my question has to do with the nomenclature, actually. In my lifetime, when I went to university, there were women's centers, and they have all in Canada seem to be renamed women and trans centers. And also also in my lifetime there used to be women's studies, but now it's women and gender studies. So I'm just curious why the name men's centers is not saying men and trans centers, and has there been discussion about that?
Do faculty members at colleges grade certain students more harshly and undeservingly in order to get rid of them? And I'm guessing you're thinking this might happen by gender. I don't really think that that happens. I don't see it happening on my campus. I think in general, most of the faculty that I know are rational enough to grade a student on the basis of merit. So if the question was leading to, could this be one of the reasons why there are fewer guys continuing and graduating because they've been graded so poorly that they have to leave, they drop out? I don't think that that's a factor. So this was a question about Michael Kimmel, and I mentioned him twice in this little talk. Professor Kimmel and I have participated online discussions a couple of times. I met him a few times. He came to Wagner College a few years ago at somebody else's invitation in the psychology department. I believe from what I've read of his books and what I've heard in his talks, and I've heard 6 or 7 of his talks, that he represents a creature that I don't know, that I've never seen. I'm thinking particularly about his book, Guyland, The Perilous World, in which I don't remember the name of the title, the rest of the name of the title. I do not see college-age men living in a perilous world. I see them in a world, as I described, where they are stunned to find that perhaps they are not welcome. How did he get to that position? You'd have to ask him. I am concerned, however, about one thing, and for the record, I may take a minute or so to say this. He has announced recently at Stony Brook that he will open the first program of studies at the graduate level leading to a degree in men's studies, as he calls it, beginning in 2017. But in fact, as I mentioned in my talk, the first of those programs will in fact begin in 2014 and will be at the University of South Australia with an international faculty. So he's been a little naughty in not telling the truth of what he knows there to be the case. And perhaps he's just a very good entrepreneur, academic entrepreneur for those things. As for his ideas, I suggest that you read his books and come to your own conclusions about his view of male development, sociology of masculinity, and the like. Do views like his belong in the universities? Of course, they belong there. But other views about men and boys must also be there. And that will not be the case at Stony Brook when his center opens, given the faculty and given his own particular ideological investment. So I would fault him only in not being sure that students who are in that course would have the widest possible range of exposure to views, and not only his, which represent a certain take on things. I could argue some of the details of that, but I'd rather you read the book.
Before we get to the subsequent question, just with a show of hands, how many more people are interested in asking questions? I only ask that because we're working under a fairly tight schedule right now. We have to officially end at 9 o'clock. It looks like by university time it's 3 minutes to 9. I think we have considerably more time than that. So how many of you were interested in asking questions? Okay.
Yeah, on the trans and issue, that's a highly specialized area within gender studies, as I understand it. And I'm sure that any comprehensive women's studies / gender studies or any male studies / men's studies program should in fact consider that. I do a course at Wagner called Other Sexualities, which takes up the whole variety of sexual and gender expression. My interest is only in comprehensiveness and all voices being heard and all views being expressed. That's what we have to give students. We don't want to give them. We're not there to propagandize. We're not there to inculcate dogma. We're there to teach people how to think, and that means bringing to them the full range of ideas on a given topic, no matter how incompatible they are, and no matter how they might annoy any one particular person. If we've done that, we've done the right job on campus. They then make up their minds. Using their own judgment, which we hope we've also helped them improve since the first day they arrived. Okay, so we're going to have 3 more questions in the bunch, and then we have to move out because of the regulation of the space.
Okay, so we'll take the first of the last questions.
Good evening. My name is Phil Vincer. I am the Secretary of the Canadian Maltese Charitable Service Trust, a senior executive at Canada Court Watch. I've recently decided to write for A Voice for Men, and I've had discussions with Justin Trottier with respect to assisting them in raising funds for the Senate that they're working on. I have been advocating for the rights of children and families. I've been advocating for the rights of children and families, which includes everybody, with focus on children for the past 8 years. Prior to that, I was a businessman, and I was oblivious to any of these problems that we're seeing these days. As it turns out, I have seen children from as early as kindergarten, where I've assisted to teach in classrooms, where they're having difficulty with the problems of divorce. So the issue of children being distressed begins at an early age. Where I'm heading with this is an area that I've noticed as to being the biggest problem, and I think we need to address it ahead of the university level, is the issue of suicide. In Canada, 8 men and 2 women, just a little less than 2 women a day, will commit suicide every single day. To put that in perspective, that's the same amount of people that have died at 9/11 every single year. That's 30,000 men that have died in that period of time, and 3,000 women. I would like to stress the importance, and my question would be, what can we do to ensure that we as educators, as mentors, bring it to public light that this condition exists, a condition that is very, very difficult for me, as I know dozens of people who have committed suicide, including Earl Silverman, who I spoke with just 2 weeks before he took his life, and he did not seem as if he was going to do such a thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi again. Thank you
Hello.
for the talk and for answering my previous question. My next question, I guess, is there does seem to be an underrepresentation of men in universities. I'm not as familiar with the situation in the U.S., which is where you live, but here in Ontario, at least, it seems that there's a percentage of men and I say men specifically because it's mostly men, who go into trades, you know, things like becoming a plumber, electrician, many more. These are, you know, fields where women are underrepresented. So I'm wondering, do you think part of the reason why men are underrepresented in universities is because some of them go to trades, into the trades, or do you think it's specifically because of the cultural misandry that you mentioned? Thank you.
Thank you.
So my name's sorry, my name's Adam McPhee. I'm one of the board members of CAFE, and just in regards to the trans issue, one of the things you've mentioned is that a men's center would really complement a women's center. So do you not think being trans inclusive would really support a women's center? For instance, if you've got trans men talking about them still needing a cervix scan, because even though they're a trans man, they still have a cervix, just like a women's center would have to talk about trans women still needing to get prostate scans. And at the same time, do you not think it would be stigmatizing for a trans man trying to access a women in trans center going in the body of a man, which is what they feel they should be identifying as, but they're going into a women's center and feeling they have to identify their trans identity, which they may not actually want to be open about. So do you not think that could be a good crossover between the two centers?
I do. Now you can pronounce us man and wife. And yeah, the trades have remained pretty much at the same level, and so I would say that the numbers of men who are at college, at university, their decrease is not because they're going there. In fact, the numbers of blue-collar jobs, as I understand, the trades, so-called, are diminishing. Right? More of this kind of work can be done by machines than ever before. So it leaves us again with this extra number, this surplus of men who seem to have nowhere to go. So I don't see that as a factor here. And going from 3 to 2 to 1, the most important thing to happen is to have fathers like you. I met them. We met before this all started, and I think that this kind of man, this kind of father, and I met. If you didn't hear me just say that. My father is here as well. I met. Okay. And I met his son. I think we underestimate the importance of fathers in the lives of children, boys and girls, but most particularly in the lives of boys. And given the fact of divorce, the high divorce rate, and the likelihood that a son or sons and daughters will be given to a mother, that means that in 2 out of 3 cases, that means that these boys and girls, and for very different reasons, these children will suffer from the absence of the influence of the father. The father is, I think, perhaps a major cultural figure that we have lost sight of in this whole discussion too. I'd like to end on a really jazzy note, but I can't think of one. I just would like to thank Justin and Cafe for inviting me here, and I would invite anybody who had a question to send me an email, and I'll be happy to respond to it.
As well, everyone here is invited to the fundraising reception across the street, College, at O'Grady's Tap and Grill. So I hope to see you there. Thank you very much to everyone. To speak to us today. Thank you very much.